Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Fix double Game Week 23 live stream. My name is FPL Nacho, and in this video, we are going to be covering off all of those double Game Week 23 hot topics that have been asked throughout the week. And that includes things like whether to sell Martinelli and which Arsenal asset to buy. We're going to be discussing the upcoming double and blank game weeks. We're also going to be discussing Man City assets and, of course, my own personal team reveal, as I feel like I'm very, very close to where I want to be with my transfer plan. And it's also worth noting as well that we have just had another double game week announcement that we are going to cover off at the start of this video. So you want to make sure you are sticking around for that one, as it has only been released 5 or 10 minutes ago at the time of recording, so that one will be very, very fresh. So guys, let me know if you are tuning in the chat. It'd be excellent to see who is involved. I can see Cheekster as always in the chat, and Shaz as well. Hope you are doing very, very well. First and foremost, if you can drop a like on the live stream, that would be much appreciated. It always just helps get it out to more people who might be interested in this sort of content. And of course, if you are new around here and you enjoy the content that you are listening to, then please do drop a hit the subscribe button. That'd be awesome if you can join the Fantasy Football Fix channel. Right, guys, as I mentioned, we have just had a double game week announcement. So let's get straight into that one. We can cover off some initial thoughts in regards to it, and then we can deep dive into the original part of the live stream. So let's get into that one, guys. Okay, guys, so as I mentioned, about 5 or 10 minutes at the time of recording, we have just had a double Game Week 27 announcement. Now, we knew that there was going to be a potential double game week in either 26 or 27. And you can see on screen here that, taken from my Fantasy Football Fix social media account, I'm just going to reel off the teams that are doubling, and then we can talk about their fixtures. So, as expected, Brighton double in Game Week 27. They are away against Leeds and at home against Crystal Palace. So, if you are a Matoma owner right now, then you're in a fantastic position. Even though he blanks in Game Week 25, the fixtures in and around that are fantastic for Brighton. And I would actually argue that's a really fun double game week for Brighton. Leeds, not necessarily the most defensive team. And Crystal Palace with a home fixture against them, I think is actually a really, really good fixture for Brighton. Now, Crystal Palace, another team that double, they have a bit more of a trickier one. At home against Man City and away against Brighton. Now, I would expect right now that not many managers have an investment in a Crystal Palace asset. Zaha, obviously with his injury, usually is the route to go for. But with that right now, maybe someone has Mitchell in the defence, but looking at that double, I don't really think that is something that we need to jump to right now, in particular with that Man City fixture. And you'd argue Brighton away is even tougher for them. But again, if I am missing an asset you think is worthwhile mentioning, get it in the chat and we'll discuss that player. Southampton, another team that don't have the most favourable double. Away against Man United, and we need to remember this is a Southampton team that are really struggling for form right now. And then they play at home against Brentford. Now, they could find some form around then, but Brentford have proven that they are a fantastic unit, full stop. And in particular, when I look at Southampton, I struggle to think about assets that might be worthwhile for our consideration. Goal scoring really isn't a thing right now at Southampton. There's no forward that is catching the eye. And with Ward-Prowse, we know he is Mr. Consistent and he is playing in a bit more of an advanced role. But right now, with the form of Southampton, I think there's much better ways that we can spend our money rather than going down the Southampton route. But, of course, it is worth noting their double that they do have. Now, last up, the final double in Game Week 27 is Brentford. And they are away against Everton and away against Southampton. And I think this is very similar to Brighton. I think these are fixtures that we definitely can target for our FPL assets. Now, when we are looking at Brentford, they have been in fantastic form defensively, keeping 4 clean sheets in their last 5 games. And if we do continue to see that trend continue, I do think that a defensive option at Brentford could be a good option for our teams. But we need to remember, similar to Brighton, Brentford do blank in Game Week 25. So these aren't players that we're going to be considering right now for our specific transfer plans. But looking at their attacking options, realistically, midfield isn't the area to go for, but we know with Ivan Toney on penalties and his underlying stats that he constantly produces, I think he is definitely one to consider around that time period, alongside someone like Vissa or even an Mbeumo could crop up later down the season. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys a quick heads up on that double game week 27 announcement if you weren't aware of it. My kind of general consensus is if you are a Brighton owner right now, this is fantastic news for you because you never were going to sell him with the blank in game week 25. And now you have the double in 27. Matoma owners are just laughing right now, and those that maybe have a defensive cover in the likes of Dunk. With this announcement right now, I don't think it changes too much. I don't think we still go into Brighton assets for this particular game week, just because game week 25 is quite a tricky game week to negotiate without your free hit. Now, if you are planning on free hitting in game week 25, then I think buying a Brighton asset has just become even more of a priority for you, because you can bring in Matoma for your team, have him for 23 and 24, knowing that you're going to free hit in game week 25, so you can negotiate the blank, and then you come back to Matoma and maybe a Dunk in your team for 26 and the double in 27. If you're not planning on free hitting in game week 25, then I would argue that even though it would be tempted to bring in Matoma right now, my question to you is, how does your squad look bringing in a blank game week player like Matoma? Can you negotiate it without the free hit? It might cause a few problems. And the same is going to apply for Brentford players as well. Southampton Palace players, I just can't get too excited about. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. I'll be really interested to know what your thoughts are generally on this double. It's quite interesting when we get double game weeks with teams that aren't necessarily top tier teams. We don't have the likes of Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, who we want to go big on those premium assets. This could be a really nice week for us to go on them differentials and really make up some ground for those that are in ranks that they're not too happy with. So let me know your thoughts, guys. I'm just going to dip into the comment section and then we'll get back into the live stream format. So JP saying he's looking ahead to game week 25. Who would you bring in for Digne? I have Shaw, Stones, Trippier, White. Was looking at Tarkowski and Kilman. I think both are fantastic options. I would prioritise right now Tarkowski. I think the question for you as well is, what are you doing with John Stones? John Stones guaranteed not to play for the coming game weeks with his injury. That's just going to be sat there in your team as a bit of a cash cow. Could you argue that Digne, and again, I don't know his injury status right now, so please do update me in the comment section. But anyway, Tarkowski would be the route I'd go for. The reason being, we know they have a double in game week 25, guaranteed. And they also play in game week 28, guaranteed. Kilman, on the other hand, yes, he does double in game week 25, but we don't know whether game week 28 is confirmed yet, even though the 28 fixture is better than what Everton's is. So I would probably just favour the guaranteed that Tarkowski and Everton does offer for you. FPL Invincible, hope you're doing well. Immortal Technique, hope you're doing well. And Torji, I hope you are doing well yourself. JP saying, do you think the next 2 game weeks for Man United without Casemiro and Eriksen's long-term injury will affect points for Shaw, Bruno and Rashford? How was their performance on Wednesday versus manager-less Leeds? Yes, so I think from a defensive perspective, it definitely is going to hinder the team and the output that maybe Shaw or maybe those sat with Martinez later down the line. I do think there is going to be goals in that Leeds fixture, as if they are still adopting that kind of high-tempo press football, then I am anticipating there to be opportunities with them, because Casemiro, such a fantastic player in just dictating the tempo as well as breaking down attacks. So I think it is going to negatively affect the defenders and maybe justifies us moving away from Luke Shaw now, as we know that they blank in game week 25. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity for me to move away from this double game week 27 announcement and for us to focus on the shorter term in hand. So remember, guys, make a mental note of double game week 27, but my initial reaction is we don't need to start piling into these teams right now. I think it's just fantastic news for those that have Brighton options. Okay, so we're going to continue your question, JP, but I've just got on screen here the upcoming fixtures for the next 3 game weeks, because even though double game week 27 is going to naturally catch our attention, we still need to understand the game weeks that are in front of us and are absolutely confirmed. Now, you mentioned in regards to Man United, well, although Man United have an okay coming fixtures away against Leeds and at home against Leicester, they have that guaranteed blank in game week 25. And I would argue with the suspension of Casemiro, maybe deliberating moving away from somewhere like Luke Shaw to a player that has a double. So for example, if you don't have any Arsenal defensive coverage and you can't get to a third attacker, I think someone like a Luke Shaw to a Gabriel is perfectly fine sideways move for you to capitalise, because ideally Gabriel plays in all of these fixtures, and that will be 5 games compared to Luke Shaw's 2 over those 3 game weeks. It's a no-brainer to make a move like that. William saying Martinelli to Saka, let's go. William, that's a really interesting topic there that you've brought up, because it's something I will be discussing in a bit, my own personal team plan, so make sure you do stick around for that one. But Saka looks like a fantastic option. JP saying start Bruno or Matoma. And looking at it in regards to Brighton away against Crystal Palace, I don't think that's necessarily going to be much of a goal fest there. I would probably still favour Bruno, even though Matoma is in red hot form right now. And Mads tuning in from Tromsø, Norway. Awesome. That's awesome to hear that you're tuning in from there. I love hearing where you guys are getting involved from. Right, so we're going to come back to the comment section in a minute, but I want to just touch on the upcoming fixtures that I did mention. As always, a traditional coffee on this live stream, even though it is the evening here. You know, we do what we do here. So, right, looking at the doubles for the teams coming up, we know already that Arsenal is absolutely the route that you need to go for with your transfers. If you don't have triple Arsenal, you absolutely need to get into triple Arsenal. Double in 23 at home against Brentford and Man City. Away against Aston Villa in game week 24, and then they double in game week 25 away against Leicester and at home against Everton. I think these are fantastic fixtures all across the board for Arsenal, even the Man City one at home, because I think in that fixture we know Arteta is going to roll out his best team in that fixture. So you really don't have to worry about potential rotation in game week 23 at all. And that's why I really think Saka's, Odegaard's are absolutely the route to go for. Now, we are going to come on to an Arsenal comparison in a minute, but I do think right now the combination of maybe a Saka and an Odegaard from a minutes perspective is absolutely the route that you can go for if you are planning your transfers right now. Nketiah feels like the real high upside move, and I think he is safe for game time for the foreseeable future with Arteta's recent comments about Jesus' injury. So minutes is going to be all about Saka and Odegaard. If you want that high kind of ceiling, and Nketiah is the route that you want to go for. Now, Liverpool, you can see, are on this list for the doubles with their double in game week 25. And my initial reaction with Liverpool is we don't need to steam into them at all right now. Yes, at home against Everton, we could see a bounce back from Liverpool and we could see goals scored, but I just don't think it's necessary where we need to prioritise our transfers. Man City and Arsenal doubling in game week 23 just means give ourselves a little bit of breathing space for Liverpool assets. Van Dijk returned to training, Jota returned to training, and one other that slipped my mind. But I do think with these returning players coming back to the team, Bobby Firmino, I do apologise, with that tricky away fixture against Newcastle, that is going to feel like the perfect acid test for Liverpool as a collective. We could roll into Newcastle away with a front line, for example, of Salah, Jota, Darwin Núñez, maybe even Bobby Firmino and Van Dijk in defence. And straight away, we've moved away from a Harvey Elliott, Oxlade-Chamberlain combination or a Gakpo to proven Premier League players. And I do think that is going to benefit Liverpool long term. And it feels really nicely timed with the return of these players for double game week 25. Away against Crystal Palace and home against Wolves feels like the opportunity to go in on a Liverpool attacker if we do see some sort of improvements from them over the coming game weeks. But right now, you don't need to be moving into them. I just think it's too risky, and the price of them just doesn't justify their form as we speak. Wolves, I've discussed. I think they're good options. Kilman in particular in defence is the route that I would recommend you going for. His minutes have been pretty much locked every single week. I think he's played every minute. Fixtures are fantastic. Yes, away against Fulham and Liverpool isn't the best, but I think Kilman at Wolves is fantastic coverage if you want a cheap defender. And Man City, with their double coming up in game week 23, I think double Man City is essential for this week. Haaland, KDB would be my double of choice. But then after that, rotation is going to happen inevitably with the Champions League in game weeks 24 and 25 wedged in between. Everton, I've touched on that. Double in 25, Tarkowski would be the route that I would recommend you going for. And I think it's perfectly fine transfer if you want to get him in this week. Bench him and then look to play him in game week 24 and game weeks 25. Now, just quickly touching on the blanks, again, I want to quickly cover this off, guys, so you are aware of the landscape of the fixtures for the coming game weeks. Brighton, blank in game week 25, but as I mentioned, with the double game week 27 announcement, there is zero chance that you are moving away from any of your Brighton assets. Simply bench them in game week 25, and then you are coming into some fantastic fixtures long-term for Brighton. Would I buy Brighton right now? Probably not, unless, as I mentioned, you plan on free hitting in game week 25, because then you can pile in on Dunk and Matoma, for example. Get yourself some favourable fixtures with Palace away and Fulham at home. Free hit in 25, and then you come back to those Brighton assets for game week 26 and the double in 27. Otherwise, I think you avoid if you're not free hitting in 25. And Man United, as I mentioned, I feel like we are going to slowly move away from them. Shaw, in particular, with Casemiro being out, I think that does affect their defensive performances. And with the blank in 25, it feels like a really easy sideways move for you to get to an Arsenal defender. Maybe even the cash cow for you to go to a Liverpool defender if we do see some stability with Jurgen Klopp's team. Brentford, as I said, don't be going into Brentford right now, but could be considerations after that blank with their double game week 27. Bournemouth, they're just in there because they are in the fixture ticker. And Newcastle, again, if you haven't sold Almiron, I still think he is worth selling in your teams with that blank in game week 25 and mix fixtures afterwards. If you are a Trippier owner, I don't think we need to panic right now. He is still accumulating monster bonus points apart from last week of all weeks. I think the home fixture against Liverpool could be a low-scoring affair, and I wouldn't be benching Trippier necessarily for game week 24. And if you can ride out game week 25 with Trippier, I absolutely think that is the route to go for in your team. So let me know your thoughts in the live chat, guys. Again, we have plenty of us in the chat, which is awesome to see and tuning in. So if you haven't already, drop a like. That would be fantastic for us, guys. Right, just checking out some more of the comments. JP saying -4 for Stones to Ake / Akanji. Worth it? I'm not as bullish when it comes to the Man City defence right now. I really don't think they are right from an attacking and a defensive perspective. If I was to go with one, it probably would be Ake, and hope that he just does play in game week 24 and 25 as well. For a -4, I'm not huge on it, but I get it. If your squad isn't strong enough to necessarily bench Stones this week, then I think it's more than a capable transfer for you to Ake. And John saying, I'm thinking Bruno and Martinelli for De Bruyne and Saka for a -4, and I can justify that move there. I think that's a good move for your team. I anticipate Kevin De Bruyne to start both of the double, and then hopefully if you can get the Forest game for game week 24, he offers you a perfect placeholder for Mo Salah if you want to go for him in double game week 25 for Liverpool. FPL Invincible saying, I'm struggling with the moves this week for -4 hit. I can move Bruno and Martinelli to Saka and Mahrez, or Tony and Martinelli to Nketiah and Mahrez. Well, I think the big thing right now for you is the double game week 27 announcement. How much are you going to be kind of thinking about that going long term with Tony? If you're not really that fussed and you want to sell him, I like the move that you're discussing there in regards to selling Tony and Martinelli for Nketiah and Mahrez. I think the big thing about Mahrez is minutes, we just really don't know. So you need to understand, if you do the first move and you sell Bruno to Mahrez, you're basically selling a player that is guaranteed to play 180 minutes over the next 2 game weeks. Whereas Mahrez, he has a double in game week 23 and he plays Nottingham Forest away in game week 24. But I would not be surprised at all if he played 60, 30, 70, for example. And before you add those points up, you start to think to yourself, it's pretty much going to be identical to what Bruno Fernandez is playing himself. Khalid saying, is it worth keeping all my blank game week 25 players and then using my wildcard in game week 25? No, I would not be playing my wildcard in game week 25. If you were going to play something, it would be the free hit in game week 25. But I think the general advice is going to be, can you negotiate game week 25 without any chips? I think they're going to be more beneficial later down the line. But of course, teams are all specific to yourself. Some people might be out there and are really in a bad place with 9 players that are blanking in game week 25. And if that is the situation, then maybe a free hit in game week 25 would be the route to go for. But I'd think a wildcard in game week 25 is off the table realistically. John saying, when should we play a wildcard and free hit? Thoughts? I think realistically, again, it is going to be completely team dependent. The way I like doing it is wildcarding when we have an understanding of a big double game week. The reason being, you wildcard with 15 players that are going to be doubling in that game week, and then you bench boost in that large double to basically have 15 players doubling, and you can really capitalize on the expected minutes of all those players. With the free hit, I'm being flexible. I'm going to wait for the fixtures to be kind of confirmed longer term, and I think you just need to be fluid with the free hit, but I think it will be game week 29 and onwards, really, with the free hit. No confirmation right now on my end, realistically. Right, guys, I see the live chat. Thank you for putting the comments in. Keep dropping them in. Any questions, we're going to keep coming to them as we progress. So just a quick update for those that maybe have kind of jumped into the live stream recently. There has been a double game week 27 announcement that you can see on the screen here. Brighton, Crystal Palace, Southampton and Brentford all double in 27, and it makes it a really interesting conversation because both Brighton and Brentford blank in game week 25. So it's going to make their assets very, very interesting on when people maybe decide to go into them. The general understanding is if you have Brighton assets, you absolutely hold on to them. If you're looking to buy one, just need to remember that they do blank in game week 25. And I think the general consensus is, although this is quite an exciting double game week from a low ownership perspective, I don't think we need to necessarily consider buying any of their assets right now. I think this is going to be something we consider after blank game week 25. Then we can negotiate the players that we want to have in that particular game week. So guys, we discussed the blank game weeks, we discussed the doubles, and we discussed the double game week 27 announcement. Let's move into Arsenal assets. Let's cover off Martinelli, what to do with him, and which players should you be buying for your teams. So guys, we have got a graphic here looking at the Arsenal midfielders in isolation. Now, as I mentioned, I really do think Nketiah is a fantastic transfer for your FPL teams. The recent quotes from Arteta suggests that Gabriel Jesus has returned to training, but when I'm talking training, it is very much just light jogging, straight line running on the grass. He's not back in on full training. And realistically, the way that Arteta has been talking, it doesn't sound like he's going to be rushing Gabriel Jesus back in anytime soon. So looking at the fixtures for Arsenal, and you can see them there, the next 4 fixtures on screen, I would anticipate Nketiah to play the double in 23, Villa away. I think he'll play the double in game week 25 as well. Apologies, it hasn't been updated there. We will discuss that. You can see here, sorry. Arsenal fixtures, they double in game week 25, away against Leicester and at home against Everton. So please do ignore the fixture ticker that we have on our screens here. I do apologise. So looking at the underlying stats for midfielders on screen, I really do love this argument that we are having with Martinelli and what to do with him, because it comes down completely to what is your mindset in FPL and whether you can deal with potential drama, something that I feel like I have definitely become better with over time. Now, the reason I say that is because when we look at the underlying stats for Martinelli, you can see that he is probably the most rounded asset out of all of them. Expected goals per 90, and this is post-World Cup. He matches Saka at 0.23 per 90. Odegaard slightly less at 0.17 per 90. And when we look at the expected assists, he's second best. Odegaard, we know, is a bit of a freak of nature when it comes to chance creation in this Arsenal team. But Martinelli posting 0.22 per 90 is better than what Saka is doing. So when we look at it from that perspective, he's actually posting better general expected goal involvement than what Saka is doing. The big thing, though, that is worth noting, of course, and I talk about this in live streams, is the difference between a good FPL option and a fantastic FPL option is their bonus point accumulation. Players like Odegaard, who are averaging 1.21 bonus points per 90, when we start to average that out over the course of the season, that's where the big gaps become very, very clear when we look at that tally of midfielders at the end of the season and their points. And it's the reason why Odegaard might finish on 180 points and Martinelli will finish on 150 or so. It's that bonus point accumulation that Odegaard is getting week in, week out. And the same can be said for Saka at 0.67 bonus points per 90. Martinelli at 0.18. And that is definitely going to come down to the minutes that has been shared with him since the World Cup. In the last 3 league fixtures, he has been substituted early for Leandro Trossard. And I think this is where the big discussion is coming for Martinelli. And I want you guys to kind of have this mindset going into double game week 23, as I think it's probably the best way to have it. With Martinelli, looking at the underlying stats, if you were to say to me that all three of these assets are going to play the next 3 game weeks, which we know is going to be 5 fixtures in total, and all of them was going to play every single minute of them, there is no reason to believe that Martinelli might not be the highest scoring midfielder out of all of them based on the underlying stats that we are looking at. That's just facts. So when we apply that kind of mindset, we need to think to ourselves that if Martinelli starts each and every game, there is absolutely the high possibility that he could deliver in the time that he has on the pitch, because the stats just suggest that it is there. The goal threat's there, the shots per 90 is there, the shots in the box per 90 is there. But the minutes and the expected minutes is the thing that flags to me that Martinelli is worth selling in your teams. When we look at the double game week with them in game week 23, we need to remember that we're in a situation here where both Saka and Odegaard are most likely going to play between 160 and 180 minutes. Now, I don't think it's inconceivable to think that maybe Martinelli plays 60 minutes in the first game and 60 minutes in the second game. And straight away, we have got 120 minutes of Martinelli versus potentially 170 to 180 minutes of Odegaard and Saka. And straight away, when we start to apply that sort of mindset, we think, yes, Martinelli could deliver on his time in the pitch, but when we look at the next 3 game weeks and 5 fixtures, those minutes really start to add up. And basically, every single match, we could be seeing Odegaard on the field for 25 more minutes per game. That's where it really starts to rack up. And I think, for that very reason, selling Martinelli is the right move for your teams. Now, that isn't to say that Martinelli isn't going to rock up in this double game week, start both, and be the highest scoring midfielder. I absolutely don't think that is out of the realms of possibility. But the way I'm viewing it is, game week 23 double, 24, and game week 25 double, I anticipate Saka and Odegaard to play the majority of minutes over that period. And because of that reason, even though we might get from time to time Martinelli outscore them, I expect over the next 3 game weeks them to have the larger share of minutes, therefore the higher potential for attacking returns. And I think it's all about putting yourself in a position where you own the players that have the potential for attacking returns based on expected minutes. So what would I do if I was in a position to sell Martinelli? I think Martinelli to Saka is the route that I would go for if you had the funds available, but it comes with a few caveats. You need to look a little bit further down the line. Does that 1.3 million extra that you're paying for Saka block you from going to another player later down the line? So for example, you could do Martinelli to Saka and have 0 million in the bank. But that may block you from maybe doing something like Kevin De Bruyne to Mo Salah in game week 25 if you wanted to make that move. Of course, you could take a few points hits to use another player to make cash cow kind of sacrifices, but it's worth noting that longer term. Otherwise, sideways move from Martinelli to Odegaard is absolutely fine. And there's no reason to suggest that Odegaard might not outscore Saka over this period. I just want to go for the player that is going to be having the penalties and is offering the higher goal threat. And I see that with Saka in terms of both the underlying stats and the eye test. And sometimes when you watch football, you want to go for the player that you're scared of. And it absolutely is Bukayo Saka when I am watching Arsenal week in, week out. He is their main man when it comes to goal threat, I do believe. And it is the player that they do look for in their team. So to cap it off, if you have Martinelli, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to hold him if you are in a position where you have other fires to attend in your team. I could see him starting both, absolutely. But if we're looking at it more as a longer term perspective, I think selling him is the right move for expected minutes. My first move would be Saka if you can afford it. Otherwise, Odegaard is a fantastic option. You can see that with the underlying stats here and the projected points over the longer term. Let me know your thoughts on the live stream, guys. I know that was a little bit of a ramble, but hopefully it's giving you a bit more of a clarity on what direction I would do if I was in that position right now. Right, let's go back into the live chat, guys, and then we'll be covering off my current transfer plans going into double game week 23. So, let me just see where we got to. Mads is saying Martinelli to Saka and Shaw to... Martinelli, Saka and Shaw to Kilman for a -4. Kilman has nice fixtures from now until double game week 25. I like that move. Yes, I do think it's a good move. It's all about your squad depth, though. Do you need to play Kilman in the trickier fixtures? I think for him, though, for double game week 25, it's a more than fine move for you to make. And you just need to view it a bit more longer term for your team. Ice Cold Jones saying, should I drop a Martinelli for Odegaard and Saka for a -4 point hit? Ice Cold Jones, hopefully that section there did answer it for you. I think for a -4, you just need to have the mindset that it may not pay dividends in game week 23, but if we are looking from now until from now until game week 28, it will pay dividends just because of the expected minutes of the players that you're bringing in. And as I mentioned, I think Saka is the number one option, as long as it is not blocking you out of other moves because of the additional funds that you're needing to spend for Bukayo Saka. Luke Grayson saying, sorry, I've only just joined the live. What's the move then, Saka or Odegaard? And as I discussed, if you can get to Saka, that would be the route I would recommend. But I think Odegaard is a fantastic option, and you can see that with the underlying stats here on the screen. And again, it is worth noting what Cheekster is pointing out in the chat, which is really fantastic information. The bonus point accumulation that Odegaard is getting makes that difference up a little bit sometimes in the lack of goal threat that he is offering. Akil saying, would you keep Fernandez or sell for KDB, given Leeds and Leicester for Fernandez? Yes, so this is a really interesting position that a lot of managers are in right now in regards to Bruno Fernandez. And just a quick reminder of the fixtures that are coming up for Man United. You can see that on the right-hand side of your screens for the blank side. Man United are away against Leeds and at home against Leicester. Kevin De Bruyne, on the other hand, will be double against Aston Villa and Arsenal and away against Nottingham Forest. But again, Pep roulette. We don't know what exact game time KDB is going to have. The reason why I like the Bruno Fernandes to Kevin De Bruyne move is that it gives you a potential placeholder for Mo Salah in game week 25. Now, of course, if you are not with the Liverpool assets and you don't want anything to do with them, then this is kind of irrelevant, the conversation that I'm having right now. But I do like the Bruno Fernandes to KDB move. First and foremost, if it's for free, you're getting my maths is terrible, 2 additional fixtures between game week 23 and 25 if you wanted to hold on to him. I think Kevin De Bruyne starts both based on the benching that he did have against Spurs. And importantly, as I mentioned, it gives you a placeholder for game week 25 if you wanted to go sideways to Mo Salah. Otherwise, Bruno Fernandes to Salah is going to require money in the bank or a cash cow sacrifice like a Cancelo down into a Tarkowski for you to free up the funds to make that move. It's all about the kind of direction you want to take your team going forward. Murphy saying, debating rolling, but we'll see. Martial out for who? I already have triple Arsenal. Okay, so an interesting position because naturally I would have recommended you going for Nketiah. Now, looking at the fixtures coming up for the teams, I don't necessarily think there are many forwards in the teams that double that are worth targeting. As you mentioned, you already have Nketiah. What is your team like with you benching Martial? Because it sounds like he is going to be out for this game week. Can you go with this week rolling and having a team fielded without Martial? Otherwise, realistically, do you have the funds to go Darwin? Maybe an option, but there will be future rotation for Firmino. Do you take a risk and go for an Alvarez? But again, I would say that's equally as risky as having an injury-prone Martial in your team. And unfortunately, Calvert-Lewin sounds like he is going to be continually injured all the time and somebody that we can't really consider for our FPL teams. And Colm saying, I've decided on a -8 of Tony, Watkins and Martinelli out for Kane, Nketiah and Mahrez. 5.6 million in the bank. I feel happy with the squad and it gets rid of a blanket in game week 25. Also, yeah, Colm, I don't mind that at all. Remember, double game week 27 has been announced, which will include Tony and Brentford. But again, that's quite far in the future. I don't think you need to worry about that too much. You're going to get plenty of games out of the players that you're bringing in. And again, it's worth noting for Harry Kane, blanking in game week 28. But again, that is a long term in the future. We don't need to worry about that too much right now. And then Bryce saying, love your stream, Nacho. Always a chill and informative one. Thank you very much. I'm suffering this season, so really liking the look of Brighton assets for game week 27. I'm shifting Almiron this week and can move to either Odegaard or Saka. Then it's a debate of shifting Bruno to Mahrez or KDB for a hit. Yeah, so Almiron, I think it's time to sell. The underlying stats have really dipped off post-World Cup. And you're on about moving to an Arsenal midfielder. I think that's absolutely the priority for your teams. As I mentioned, I think the big thing you need to remember is my preference would be Saka, just because of the goal threat per 90 that he's offering in comparison to Odegaard. And of course, on penalties, I think that's a big factor when we are considering FPL options. But because of the 1.3 million difference, you just need to look at your personal team and say to yourself, can I afford the 1.3 million, or am I in a position where I need that 1.3 million in the bank to upgrade other departments of my team? And again, the same comes to the Bruno to Mahrez or KDB move. I think based on the underlying stats, Mahrez is the route to go for. It's just a logical play. But Kevin De Bruyne is a fantastic placeholder if you then want to go sideways to a Liverpool asset in game week 25 like Mo Salah. That's just worth keeping in mind when you are making your transfers for your teams. Right, guys. I'm going to keep obviously the chat going. I'll come back to it. Keep dropping the questions in. We're going to be going for another 20, 25 minutes or so. So plenty of time for a Q&A. But I'm just going to come to my current transfer plans for double game week 23 and give you a bit of an idea on what direction I'm going for with my teams. And again, if you can drop a like on the live stream, we massively appreciate it. We always try and hit 50 likes and you guys always do deliver it. So if you can do that before the end of the live stream, that would be fantastic. Right, guys, let's get into my current transfer plans. Okay, guys, so here's how my team is looking going into game week 23. Now, it's worth noting, this isn't my current team. This is my team with one free transfer used, and that is going to be Martinelli to Bukayo Saka. So, as I mentioned, this is my team if I was to pull the trigger on Martinelli to Saka. I haven't done it just yet because I wanted to wait for press conferences and any potential news that was going to drop. Of course, double game week 27 is a perfect example of how any news can drop at any point. So waiting until as close as possible to the deadline is quite a wise move sometimes. Now, sorry, coffee quick. I'll quickly reel off my team and my current thought process on the assets. So Kepa, more than happy to stick with Kepa. I don't feel the need to move him on. He's the perfect goalkeeper right now, racking up saves, bonus points as well. Perfect goalkeeper at his price range. Moving into the defence, Ben White is somebody that had a lot of discussion in the community right now, and I think it's rightly so. With Ben White, it's worth noting, he has played the majority of starts for Arsenal, and Tomiyasu has been available to Arteta in a lot of these games. So I think it's only because Ben White has had a few shaky games that we start to put that narrative in our heads that Ben White is going to get dropped and Tomiyasu is going to come into the team. The threat has always been there with Tomiyasu, so it is worth noting that. Yes, I do think that the chances of him being rotated are higher than what they were 2 weeks ago. I just think that's natural when a player has had a few shaky games. And with double game weeks, we know that legs get tired and Arteta needs to manage minutes. So I don't think Ben White is the ideal Arsenal defender. I would say Gabriel, just because of the lack of potential replacements for him. I don't think Arteta can really afford to bench Gabriel or rotate him. So I don't think Ben White is the ideal defender. However, do I think it's worth a -4 transfer to get rid of him? Not really. I just don't think it is worthwhile for my personal team. So I'm going to stick with Ben White and accept what will be with the minutes going forward for him. Luke Shaw, again, a player that blanks in game week 25 and somebody that I am planning on selling in the future. For this game week in isolation, you can see on screen, I only have 2 Man City options. But right now, I'm just not really sold on the Man City defenders. I could pull the trigger on a -4 to bring in someone like Ake, but realistically, we need to remember that the double is, of course, Arsenal away. Do I anticipate a Man City clean sheet in that game? No. So I'm basically bringing in Ake for Aston Villa at home, and really, I need a clean sheet to justify the -4 point hit. Yes, I will get an additional 2 points for appearances, but what's to say Pep doesn't bench Ake in one of the games? It really is very difficult to anticipate the team that Pep is going to roll out. And for that very reason, while Luke Shaw isn't ideal for this game week, because I think Leeds are going to be producing chances at Ellen Road, the fans are going to be right up for it. And I do think Man United, without Casemiro, without Eriksen for tempo and controlling the game, it is going to be a bit more of a basketball game in that fixture. So I expect Leeds to get chances and maybe score, but I'm happy to keep Luke Shaw for now, but that will be a transfer waiting to happen. And Trippier, dare I sell him? Absolutely not with Bournemouth away. But I think there will be a conversation in future game weeks whether we do sell Trippier. I think it's going to be a case of waiting for one person to do it before we all start to pull the trigger on him. But right now, it is maniac to try and sell Trippier with an away game against Bournemouth. Moving into the midfield, Fernandez absolutely is a potential sell if I wanted to for someone like Mahrez. But when I'm looking at it over a 2 game week period, Fernandez away against Leeds and at home against Leicester, because they blank in game week 25, I can guarantee myself I'm getting 180 minutes out of Fernandez in the next 2 game weeks. Mahrez, on the other hand, has an additional fixture in those 2 game weeks, but I really couldn't say if he is actually going to get 180 minutes or more in comparison to Bruno Fernandez. And while Mahrez, yes, does have a decent home fixture against Aston Villa, the other one is away against Arsenal. I don't really anticipate huge chances for Man City in that game. So then I question Fernandez to Mahrez for -4. I'm selling a guaranteed starter in Man United and a guaranteed penalty taker for someone whose minutes are really at risk. I just can't understand the justification on that one from my team personally. Rashford as a hold, KDB as a hold, and Saka is the planned transfer, selling Martinelli. Quick update on that one. Realistically, with Saka, with Martinelli, I can go to Odegaard and it will give me more money in the bank. I believe I'll have about 1.6 million in the bank if I was to go for Odegaard over Saka. But as I mentioned, I've looked at my transfers going forward and I don't really think the 1.3 million saving is going to really drastically change my team going forward. So I think I'll just rather go for the player that I really want in Bukayo Saka. As I mentioned, a penalty taker, higher goal threat per 90. And I think his minutes are solid over the next 3 or 4 game weeks. So for that very reason, I just want to pull the trigger on Saka, get him into my team, and just kind of accept that if we do get a huge swing where Odegaard outscores Saka by 20 points in the next 3 game weeks, it just is what it is. The underlying stats don't suggest it's necessarily going to happen, but we know in FPL, all these sort of things eventually do happen. And hopefully you are just on the right end of it. And you just got to put yourself in the best possible situation to get lucky. Front 3, Mitrovic at home against Nottingham Forest. I just can't bring myself to sell him with that week. Haaland with the captaincy, no-brainer for me personally. I think he could easily, we've seen it at home, rack up a hat-trick in 60 minutes and get taken off for him to be fresh for the Arsenal game. I just think it's foolish to go against Haaland this game week. And Nketiah is the man I am praying can be the differential against someone like Odegaard. I know that his his transfers in have been going through the roof recently, but his underlying stats are fantastic. Very similar in terms of, very different to what Odegaard is. Basically nothing in the expected assist department, but through the roof in the expected goals per 90 at around 0.6. So I'm really hoping Nketiah can find the net in both of these games in the double game week 23. Bench is what it is. Andreas, Doherty, Patterson. I'm praying Patterson gets fit for double game week 25. That'll be amazing for the team and means that I don't have to use a points hit to bring in another player for double game week 25. Let me know your thoughts in the chat, guys. This is how I'm most likely to roll out. A -4 could happen, but realistically, I think it's quite a powerful move to only use 1 free transfer and be in a spot where I don't take a points hit. I just can't bring myself to bring in another Man City option, as I just think the expected minutes are so difficult to predict going forward for them. But let me know your thoughts in the chat, guys. What would you do with this team? Planned transfer is Martinelli to Saka and captaincy on Haaland. Right, let's get back into the live stream, guys. Into the chat, and we'll see what other questions are being asked right now. So Luke saying, Kepa, White, Trippier, Shaw, Mount, Martinelli, Rashford, Mahrez, Haaland, Kane, Mitro, benching Andreas, Wan-Bissaka, Patterson. 4.6 million about 1 free transfer. Thoughts? Looking to go Mount to Saka. For this game week in isolation, I think naturally the temptation would be to do Martinelli to Saka with your free transfer. But if you're in the thought process that Martinelli is going to play a minimum of 120 minutes, I like the Mount to Saka move. You're selling a player that I think is at risk of game time at Chelsea right now with all these players that they do have. I don't think Mount is as much of a starter and sure thing. And I personally am anticipating quite a low-scoring game against West Ham in game week 23. And I don't feel like Mount is the player you want in that Chelsea team right now. So I like the Mount to Saka move. Of course, the easy option would be Martinelli to Saka and be done with it. But I like the Mount to Saka move because I don't think anyone is anticipating Martinelli to be benched in both games. And I think it is definitely been blown out of proportion, Martinelli's game time at risk. I would think that Martinelli starts both and probably plays 80 in one and maybe 60 in the other, for example. So you're probably going to be getting maybe around the 140 minute mark. And when you compare that to 90 minutes of Mount or maybe even 60 minutes of Mount, I like Mount to Saka as your transfer, I agree. Cristiano Ronaldo in the chat, guys. What's up, mate? I have Shaw, Rashford, Estupinan and Trippier blanking in game week 25 and already transferred out in March for Mahrez. which two should I transfer out for game week 25? Well, if you didn't know already, and I'll just put it back up on the screen for anybody that is coming to the chat late or on the live stream, double game week 27 has been announced. Brighton are one of those teams that double in game week 27. So with your position where you have a Stupinan, absolutely cannot be selling a Stupinan in game week 25. You need to bench him, as he will be a really powerful asset to own in that future game week. I think Luke Shaw is the obvious transfer for you to sell in game week 25. You could move to a Liverpool asset potentially, or if you don't have triple Arsenal, get yourself triple Arsenal then. And then it's going to be realistically what we do in that position. I don't think we need to be too worried right now. I think Rashford or Trippier is going to be a cash cow for a lot of managers, but I think we address that later down the line. I think the clear thing for you is you don't sell Stupinan because Brighton double in game week 27. Evening, hope you're doing well. Preston saying, looking for a cheap midfielder as a replacement so I can get Saka in for Martinelli. Well, if we are looking at the fixture ticker going forward over the coming game weeks, and you're looking at a cheap, viable option, naturally, you can't go for Arsenal because it blocks a position for you, and Liverpool isn't a time to target. It's very difficult right now in the midfield department if you want to capitalise on the doubles coming up. Wolves, I don't really know a midfielder that I would recommend for you going. So I think the big question is, do you maybe go Matoma and you accept that in game week 25 he is going to blank, but you know the future fixtures are fantastic. So I think if you can negotiate game week 25, Matoma is a nice spot for you. Just have a look how your team might look for game week 25 because he blanks. If you can negotiate that game week, I think that's the route that you should go for your teams. When's the best time to wildcard? Cristiano Ronaldo is asking. I think it is going to be better to do it after game week 30. We should have a large double game week around game week 33 or 34. I don't know off the top of my head. So you can wildcard then to bring in 15 players that double that week, and then you use your bench boost then. Ben Smith saying, start Nonto, Andreas or Botman. I think out of that lot, I probably would be very tempted to start Botman of the bunch, I think, and just get yourself that Newcastle defensive coverage. It is worth noting though, Bournemouth I don't think are dead and buried right now, and they've bought some exciting players in the likes of Semenyo and Traore. So Bournemouth could be a different beast, but I think if you really want to double down on that Newcastle defence, that's the fixture to go for. Andreas's underlying stats haven't really been that positive, so I can't really recommend you starting Andreas. I would start probably Nonto over Andreas, as I think it's going to be really kind of rock and roll football with Leeds versus Man United in that game week. Okay guys, I can see a few more questions in the live stream, but I'm going to come on to our last slide that we do have on this live stream. That's going to be the predicted points for game week 23. So it just might give you an idea on what direction to go for with your potential transfers. Now again, the goalkeeper department, I never really sit here and recommend you making a goalkeeper transfer. I really don't think it is worthwhile for your teams. We've seen with Kepa, he can outscore double game weekers on his own. So unless you are in a desperate situation where your goalkeeper isn't playing, I wouldn't be using a free transfer on a goalkeeper in anticipation for a double. Now you can see in the defender department, it's all about Arsenal defenders. Saliba, Gabriel would be my top two defender pick. I probably would just favour Gabriel just because of that slight higher underlying stats for expected goal involvement off set pieces. But really, what are we going to get off Gabriel? Maybe 1 or 2 goals a season. So you're very lucky if you pick him up and he scores in the week that you buy him. But of course, as I say, put yourself in positions where you can get lucky. Ben White projected to score 6.8 points. But again, I do think there is, rightly so, some sort of question marks about his expected minutes over the coming game weeks. But I don't think it's enough for us to sell Ben White for a -4 to bring in someone like Gabriel. I just don't think it is worth it, but maybe I could be wrong there. Midfielders, we discussed this. De Bruyne at 9.5 projected points. If you are considering the Bruno Fernandez to Kevin De Bruyne move, I am not against that at all. I do think it would pay dividends over the next 2 game weeks. Remember, Man City have 1 additional game over that period, and it sets you up nicely for maybe a sideways move to Mo Salah in game week 25 if you want to go down that route. But you can see there as well, Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard right in and amongst it with their double game week. And interestingly, Martinelli posting a higher projected points than Odegaard. But again, I just want to make sure you guys do understand that Martinelli has come off early in the last 3 game weeks. And although I think Martinelli probably starts the majority of the games, I think he is much more likely to be an early substitution than what both Saka and Odegaard would be in game week 23, 24 and 25, because we need to remember our transfers for Arsenal players are more long-term transfers because of that double game week 25 announcement. And last up, Mahrez in the midfielders. I still think he's a perfectly fine transfer for your teams. But again, the minutes, incredibly hard to predict for someone like Mahrez. So just be cautious of that, in particular if you are doing a -4 point hit. Because the Champions League is right around the corner. Maybe Pep views Mahrez as maybe the Champions League player. If they go in the double, they lose against Arsenal, he views the title race out. He might put all his eggs in one basket in the Champions League and view Mahrez as his man to go for in Champions League games. Again, please do not read too much into that. I'm just thinking of potential directions that it could go for Mahrez's game time in the future. Last up, forwards. Haaland, by far and away the highest projected points for game week 23, and why I've been advocating managers putting the captaincy on him. I don't think we need to be clever about it in this game week. Nketiah posting good underlying stats, and that's kind of shown in the projected points at 8.2. Then we have the single game weekers in Kane, Darwin and Mitrovic. So I'll leave that on the screen for you guys, as I'm conscious of the time and I want to rattle through the last few questions in the live chat before we do come to conclusion on this live stream. Right, so let's get into it, guys. And again, if you have any questions about the projected points, my personal team, the double game week 27 announcement, let me know and we could come back to some previous slides that we had during this live stream. Ben saying start Shaw or Almiron. Really, really tricky. I'm probably going to favour Shaw, and that's only because I think his minutes are guaranteed. Almiron's underlying numbers have been really poor recently, and I think I'd just rather go for the player that I know is going to play guaranteed 90. We know Isaac is available now. Could we potentially see some rotation on the flanks? You have to remember Anthony Gordon as well available. Could we potentially see Willock off the left in a hybrid system? I don't know, but for me, I think Luke Shaw is the route I would go for the guaranteed minutes. Opinion that on Arsenal player as captain, if you don't mind that, who would be your top 3 captains of Arsenal? As I discussed, I don't think we need to be overcomplicating it this week. I think Haaland is still absolutely the route to go for, but if I had to prioritise captaincy this week, number 1 would be Saka from the Arsenal team, just because he's on penalties as well, and he's much more of a goal threat from an underlying stats perspective in comparison to Odegaard. Second would be probably Odegaard because of the minutes, and third would be Nketiah. I wouldn't be putting Martinelli anywhere near a captaincy consideration. Shaz is saying, who do you think are the differentials for both double game weeks? For this one in particular, it's difficult to pinpoint a differential because Man City and Arsenal assets are quite highly owned. But I would say Martinelli, in a weird way, is a bit of a differential. If you're of the mindset where you think, I'm going to hold on to him, each and every hour that passes, he becomes more and more of a differential. And I actually think he could, if he goes off, be a real big rank swing for a lot of managers out there. So he in himself might become a bit of a differential. KDB in himself becomes a bit of a differential for his standards. If we're looking at it from a single game week perspective, I don't think a lot of people have been selling Harry Kane, so I don't think he's necessarily going to be a differential for any manager coming up. But if I look at the rest of the fixtures here, maybe if some managers are sat there with some Liverpool assets already, a Darwin Núñez, a Trent, a Mo Salah, that could be the time, because if we are going to see a run from Liverpool, I feel like it is going to start soon with the return of some key players over the coming game weeks. Liverpool players, if you want to go early doors on them, could be the ultimate differentials, but again, they're against a Sean Dyche team who is going to make it very difficult for them. I think it's going to go one or two ways. It's going to be a low-scoring game, or Liverpool just come out the blocks and blow them away. I can't really predict that one. Bruno for Mahrez from -4, is it worth it? Personally, I would say no. Personally, I just don't think that Mahrez's minutes are absolutely locked in. Ken back saying, have Trippier, Shaw, White, Bueno. Who should I transfer in for Cancelo? Is it worth another City defender? Now, you have White already, so I'd rather you be going for the double up in the Arsenal attack, absolutely. So I think the big thing for you is, do you go a bit more long-term planning? Maybe you go for something like a Tarkowski. I know it sounds boring, but maybe you give yourself long-term coverage. We know they double in game week 25 and they have a guaranteed fixture in game week 28, and you use the funds elsewhere to improve the rest of your squad. That is definitely an option. I wouldn't be going for City double defense. City defender. unless you just want to go for Ake and give yourself some coverage, that's the route I would recommend if you want to go for a Man City option. But I really can't sit here and confidently tell you a player that is going to be guaranteed playing over the coming game weeks. I think all of them are at risk. So I think Tarkowski is a shrewd move if you want to save some money in the bank and get guaranteed coverage for the doubles and blanks coming up in the future. Otherwise, considerations outside of that, maybe you hold Cancelo for a little bit longer and then you use that as a cash cow for maybe a Robertson or a Trent if you want to go down the Liverpool route. Start Mitrovic or Matoma. This is an incredibly tricky one. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the Fantasy Football Fix projected points just to get a bit of an understanding on which player is higher on our projections. You can see on screen here that Mitrovic is projected to score 4.9 points this game week, and I can confirm that Matoma is projected to score 3.7. So we need to remember Mitrovic on penalties as well sometimes does sway it, but can you ignore the form that Matoma is in right now? I think that's the big question mark. Based on our projections, Mitrovic is the route to go for. Can you show the teams who will blank in game week 28? I don't think they've been confirmed fully yet, so I don't really want to go into that topic because it is a little bit in the future. The one thing we can understand though with the projections, the fixtures in game week 28 is that there's been no confirmed blank in game week 28, but we know for certain that someone like Everton definitely do play. Now, albeit it is away against Chelsea, but sometimes it's just important to have bodies on the ground in these sorts of game weeks, and that could be an example of why Tarkowski might be a shrewd move for your teams. Should I bring in Mahrez or play Mitrovic? It's going to be all about who you're selling there in that situation. Ben, if we don't see any improvements with Liverpool and Salah, do you think it's worth bringing him in? Again, I really think it's going to be a case of wait and see. Use the next 2 game weeks of Everton and Newcastle to get an understanding of whether Liverpool can get back to some sort of credibility in their performances. If we do see that, then I think they are the perfect opportunity for people who are at ranks that they're not happy with to maybe go toward that direction. I think there's going to be a perfect split in the FPL community. Some people who have completely writ off Liverpool are going to be like, I'm not touching them. And others that just completely value expected minutes and double game weeks. And what I mean by that is they view it and think, even though Liverpool have been crap, they have the potential to play 180 minutes in comparison to the 90-minute team here. And I think I'm more in the camp of the 180-minute direction. And with Mo Salah, people discuss about how his underlying stats and performances have been terrible since the World Cup. But he's still posting in the top 5 things like expected goals, expected goal involvements per 90. So I don't think I've ruled out Liverpool just yet. But what I love about this double game week 25 is the next 2 game weeks, we can just use this as an opportunity to just monitor Liverpool, see how they get on, key players returning, and then can we pile into their assets coming into that game week. Would you play Shaw for White or Matoma? Would you play Shaw? No, I would definitely start White right now and just hope that he starts in both. And Adam's saying Odegaard, Nketiah, Grealish in, Solanke, Alma and Martinelli out. I love the sales that you're doing in your team, absolutely. I think the big thing is the Grealish one. It's just a little bit of Foden's been pictured in training. Could we see some rotation with Grealish? I'm not huge on the Grealish one, but I love the Odegaard and Nketiah move for your teams. And Hardy's saying, I have one transfer. Should I get one of Mahrez or KDB or move Martinelli to Saka? Or do both for a hit? I have White and Odegaard. So I think my preference is going to be doing Martinelli to Saka for your teams. I just think, as I mentioned, I've discussed this previously, Martinelli's underlying stats is one of the best of all Arsenal midfielders. But I'm viewing it more over a 3 to 5 game week period. Yes, Martinelli might outscore the other players in one game week, but is his minutes going to be consistent and in comparison to Saka and Odegaard's? And as long as you have the mindset that Martinelli could outscore these anytime, any place, anywhere, but I'm investing in the player that I think has higher expected minutes. And I think I'm more of the mindset of that. And I think I give myself an opportunity that game week 23, 24, 25, they go double, single, double. So you've got 180 minutes, 90 minutes, 180 minutes. For me, I could easily see a world where Saka does 170 minutes, 90, 160 minutes, for example. I couldn't imagine Martinelli maybe doing 150, 30, and then 120 to 140. I just think there's considerable more minutes to have with Saka. Peter saying Bruno plus Martinelli for Mahrez plus Saka for a -4, or Bruno and Mitrovic for Mahrez and Nketiah. I prefer probably you doing the first move. Main reason being is because Mitrovic has a home game against Nottingham Forest, basically. Azuma saying, please, Mahrez and Kane or KDB and Mitrovic. Mahrez and Kane or De Bruyne and Mitro? Well, it's a difficult one because I think that obviously Mahrez and Kane is a great combination because you have Harry Kane in that combination. But De Bruyne gives you a nice way to go sideways to Mo Salah if you want to go down that route. I think the big thing you need to understand is this. KDB plus Mitrovic, I think, have higher expected minutes than what Mahrez and Kane does. Kane will play every minute of every week, but Mahrez, I can't sit here and confidently say that to you. So because of that, I probably would go down the De Bruyne and Mitrovic route and just know that De Bruyne is there as a cash cow to maybe a Mo Salah in Game Week 25. Ben, would you bring a Matoma for Almiron in Game Week 24 to prepare for 27 or try to wait until the blank has happened? I think if you're going in on Matoma, I think you do it this week. I think you sell Almiron to Matoma this week because then if you go for him in 24, I would probably just argue maybe just wait and do it in 26. I think if you're going to move Almiron to Matoma, it has to be this week just to justify the move. Because you get 2 game weeks worth of him, you bench him in 25, and then you have the joys of Matoma going forward, in particular in double game week 27. Right, guys, I've just looked at the time, and that is going to conclude today's live stream for game week 23. I really hope it has provided some value. Just a reminder, double game week 27 has been announced for those that didn't know about it, and those teams that are doubling is going to be Brighton, Palace, Southampton and Brentford. So make sure you just have that in the back burner. The conclusion for this, we don't need to pile into the assets just yet. It's a little bit further down the line. A little conclusion on my transfer plans. I am planning on doing Martinelli to Saka for a free transfer, and that will be it for my team. But again, make sure you're following FPL Nacho on Twitter just to keep up to date with any potential transfer plans that I do make going forward. And that just leaves me to say thank you so much for tuning into this live stream, guys. I really hope it has provided some value. If you can drop a like on your way out, that would be massively appreciated. And if you felt it brought some value and you haven't already, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. It just shows that you are engaging with the content and you might want to enjoy it later down the line. We drop plenty of content each and every week, so hopefully you can get on board on future live streams. So guys, that just leaves me to say, have a fantastic game week. I hope that your transfers pay off and you get a green arrow. And I will see you on next week's video where we discuss top transfers going into game week 24. Take care.